Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A good trading relationship is all the more important outside the EU, but then there is the problem of Saudi Arabia's human rights record and indeed its leading role in bombing rebel targets in Yemen. Today, Mrs May said she had no problem raising hard issues with the Saudis or anyone else.
It's no mistake the Prime Minister chose to come to the Middle East just 5 days after triggering our exit from the EU. Stepping off the plane in Saudi Arabia, she said she wants to extend our trade links here. But it's such links that are so controversial. Much of our trade is in arms. Weapons, critics say, are killing civilians in the Saudi-led war in Yemen. This morning, Mrs May defended our ties with the kingdom.
Trade deals, of course, are important, but at what cost? Are they not at the expense of human rights concerns?
No, we raise human rights concerns with those that we engage with. We don't stand on the sidelines. We actually raise these issues. We're able to do that because we're cooperating, because we're working with people across a number of fronts.
She also insisted the UK has given millions in aid to help those suffering in Yemen and would push the Saudis on the issue.
It's all very well being one of the biggest donors for Yemen, but what is the point of that if the aid can't get through because of the blockades and because of the bombing?
Well, we will be talking, obviously, to those involved to try to ensure that we can get that aid through and working to get that aid through. It is important that we continue that support and continue to reiterate the importance of ensuring that we deal with the humanitarian problems that are existing in the Yemen.
This is why the Prime Minister is so keen to remain close with Saudi Arabia. It's Britain's biggest trade partner in the Middle East. Annual exports to the country are worth more than £7 billion, with more than 6,000 British firms actively exporting goods to the country. It's the licensed arms sales, though, worth more than £3 billion since the Yemen conflict began, that causes such controversy.
The point is, Prime Ministers have for decades said that the only way to influence places like Saudi Arabia is to have good relations with them. But history proves that has so far had very little effect, and critics are running out of patience.
We have seen very little evidence of this pressure working in the past. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't do it. You must do it. You must raise human rights. And it's important that you do so in such a manner that is going to institute change.
We may, though, have to get used to seeing Theresa May sitting down with the Saudis. She needs to build new partners around the world post-Brexit, and not all of those will be ones we agree with. Emily Morgan, ITV News in Riyadh.
Well, the Saudi-led coalition's campaign against Yemen has been going on for 2 years. It's left millions on the brink of starvation. Our correspondent Neil Connery is the only Western journalist inside the country.
We're heading into Yemen's capital, on the only flight connecting it with the outside world. As the UN plane lands at Sana'a, the destruction of this war is clear to see, and a hint of the terrible human cost. For Yemen's most vulnerable, life hangs by a thread. After 2 years of war, they're victims of the world's largest humanitarian crisis. For mothers like Ohradir, there's no escape. She can only watch as her daughter Khadir fights severe malnutrition. She's consumed by fear and despair. In another room, Halan Ali is being cradled by his grandmother. He's 13 months old, weighing nearly half of what he should do. Her mama tells me he's so weak, he can't even stand up. We are so frightened and worried, she says. He's just so ill from the hunger. He's another victim of a blockade which has crushed Yemen's economy. Doctors here haven't been paid for 6 months. And all the while, the bombing goes on. 6 months on from that attack on this funeral hall by the Saudi-led coalition, which killed 140 people, the reminders of lives lost remain. Almost 5,000 civilians have been killed in this war so far. most of them in airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition. Aid agencies such as Oxfam and Save the Children say the UK is complicit in the humanitarian crisis engulfing this country because of its support and arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Abdul Rahman and her family of 9 live in this one room. She tells me she's exhausted and broken by the war. It's made us poorer and our children hungry. We're too frightened to take them to school because of the airstrikes. Like their country, they are alone, hidden and forgotten by the world beyond. Neil Connery, ITV News, Sana'a, Yemen.
Theresa May has arrived in Saudi Arabia, insisting that she would be raising concerns about the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, where thousands of people have died in the war between a Saudi-led coalition and rebel fighters. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn said all UK arms exports to the Saudi kingdom should be halted immediately, saying the regime had a shocking human rights record. Britain has licensed arms sales worth more than £3 billion since the bombing in Yemen began. Here's Diana Magnin.
What's in a handshake? Well, quite a lot, especially the post-Brexit grip. British exports, British jobs, all wrapped up in those 10 fingers. With Donald Trump, it's the whole gamut of transatlantic trade. With Turkey's president, never mind the obstacles, a £100 million fighter jet deal. Now the Prime Minister is on a Middle East charm offensive, striking deals to supply military training to Jordan in the fight against Islamic State, though their military's also engaged in the Saudi-led coalition's bloody campaign in Yemen. And today she met Saudi officials in Riyadh, where Yemen's the backdrop too. British arms sales to Saudi worth £3.3 billion since Riyadh intervened in their neighbour's war, despite widespread allegations that their bombing campaign violates international humanitarian law. Allegations Saudi Arabia says there's no evidence to support.
We do require the Saudis to look at international human rights issues. We have done that. We ask them where there are allegations of the ways in which the arms have been used. We urge them to investigate those and to learn any lessons from that. What I think is important is that when we look at our relationships around the world in foreign policy, that yes, we put British national interest first, but as we engage with people, we're able to raise difficult issues with them precisely because we have that relationship with them.
That's a relationship which her International Trade Secretary Liam Fox is nurturing today with Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte, the man whose war on drugs has killed thousands, who's bragged about the murders he's committed and who's threatened to burn down the United Nations. But Britain didn't build an empire on its human rights record. Military and trade back then went hand in hand. Human rights an add-on in the post-World War II liberal order. Britain has long sold arms to Saudi Arabia and many others, and there have long been concerns raised over the ethics of those deals. So has anything changed now with Brexit? And given the emphasis the UK has on securing trade deals where it can, have human rights been pushed way down the priority pecking order? British arms sales to Saudi are currently under judicial review. It's a case brought by the Campaign Against the Arms Trade, who don't believe the UK's argument that engagement buys influence.
Women have very few rights. People are being routinely tortured. Journalists are being flogged and beaten. And UK arms are being used to create a humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen. If that is the end result of 60 years of UK engagement, then it tells you that that engagement, that influence has either been extremely ineffective or it's been non-existent.
The Prime Minister went headscarf free today in defence of women's rights. But money talks in the post-Brexit era, and it'll take more than symbolic gestures to persuade her critics that a humane foreign policy is a trademark of post-Brexit Britain.